The massive NSA snooping revelations have cast a shadow over John Kerry's trip to Latin America, his first visit there since he assumed the position of Secretary of State. He has already received a chilly reception in Colombia, where officials demanded an explanation to reports that Washington had collected vast amounts of internet data there. The next stop on his trip is Brazil, which allegedly was the top regional target of the surveillance program. For more perspective, we're joined by geopolitical analyst Eric Draitser live. Thank you very much for being with us, as always, Eric. Now, what impact will the NSA surveillance revelations have on U.S. ties in the region?
Well, it's not going to necessarily have a direct impact, at least not in the way that we might traditionally understand it. Where the impact will lie is behind closed doors. The revelations, particularly from the perspective of the Brazilians about the spying and surveillance, I think that this wasn't exactly news in Brazil. What was interesting to them was the fact that the surveillance was targeting economic interests, business interests. This adds an entirely new dimension to this story because, as we all know, Brazil is one of the world's leading emerging economies, and as it's the United States' #1 trading partner in Latin America, the ties between Washington and Brasilia are, of course, very, very important. And so from a political perspective, as well as an economic perspective, the Brazilians must be asking themselves, should we begin to question this relationship we have with Washington?
Well, you mentioned Brazil emerging as an economic power. It is one of the BRICS countries. Would you expect a tough reception from Brazil, given that the country is seeking to strengthen its position as a key player in the region?
Well, it would depend on how we would define a tough reception. I think that for all appearances' sake, it will go off as it would normally a meeting with the Secretary of State visiting a foreign country. But as I mentioned, behind closed doors, I think that Brazilians are tremendously upset, particularly with the regional perspective. We know that much of the surveillance was focused on the Organization of American States and some of the other regional groupings in which Brazil plays a key role. And the United States attempting to use its surveillance and intelligence gathering as a way of leveraging the Brazilians as well as their regional partners in terms of their political relations. And so from the Brazilian perspective, they're asking themselves, can we actually trust our American partners, not only on the political level, but also on the economic level, and simply in terms of international relations? Remember that the Brazilians have made tremendous strides in improving relationships with countries like Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, Chile, and elsewhere. And so for that to be put in jeopardy by this sort of program, I think, is very troubling from the Brazilian side.
Now, widening it out a little bit, if you look at the highest profile targets on this recent list, it's Brazil, Russia, China, all of them BRICS countries. How do you explain this?
Of course, it's the United States and the ruling class in the United States that is tremendously fearful of the rising economic power of the BRICS grouping. It is not just a formality that we use this term BRICS. It represents a shift in the global economic balance of power. And the United States, knowing that its economic power is waning, is using alternative means to exercise hegemony and project its own power. And the surveillance that the NSA operates with and other agencies as well, that is a fundamental part of that. Whether it gives the United States an upper hand in negotiations, whether it allows them to use blackmail and other forms of leverage, all of this is part of the toolkit, if you will, of U.S. imperialism in Latin America and around the world.
All right. I appreciate your thoughts on that. Eric Draitser, geopolitical analyst, thank you for being with us here on RT.
Thank you.